Hello, everybody. Welcome to the XP Billionaires podcast, the only podcast with XP Billionaires of legend, which we just realized last week. All right, I am Ray Fegram. I am joined by Sky Knight and the Mel Zerker, the XP Billionaires of legend that we just spoke of. We are going to say hello to everybody right here, right now, and get to know how they're doing. And we're going to start with Sky. How are you doing today?
Well, Sky is confused, and also
Hi.
apparently talking about themselves in the third person. So there's that.
Are you going to be doing that all episode?
No, too exhausting.
Okay, just checking. Because it would be one of those situations where I'd have to check each time whether or not you did or didn't, and then I'd have to call you on it. So,
Yeah, and I'd rather just save myself the trouble.
well, fair enough. Fair enough. All right, Mel, how are you doing today?
I'm doing all right. Vacation next week. It's happening. I'm so excited. I've got one more day of responsibilities and then it's happening. Yay. Otherwise I'm good. I'm getting a little bit more D&D in my life, which I've been missing out on. So that's fun. Get to roll some clicky clacks. Yeah, that's pretty much my life right now.
No, that's awesome. Well, it looks like Sky and I will be getting into some of that in the near future too, which is nice and exciting. It's been a while.
Yes. Yes. It's going to be so much work, but yes.
I guess you may or may not have just figured out who's running the game, so.
Yeah, well, has anyone else volunteered? No.
Yeah, well, my concept is still in the planning stages, so eventually we can swap out, but for now, feel free to get us going again. Well, that being said, I think we're just going to just dive right into this week's topic. So we're into the last episode in April, which means we are finishing up our series on RPG controls. So to end things off, I wanted to take things right to the heart of the matter. This week, I just really kind of want to have a gush session about some of our favorite physical game controllers. Without a means to actually make the character do stuff, the whole concept of interactive media just wouldn't be possible. So we really should just kind of talk about the actual controller itself. So, we are not being sponsored by any of the companies or brands that we may talk about today. Just if it's a specific style or a specific type of a controller, by all means bring it up because I'd love to hear about it. And, if there's a specific controller you guys want to try out of our selections, then well, there you go. Like gives you a chance to try something brand new. So with that out of the way, I would like Sky to start us off. So let's hear what your favorite controller is.
So, my favorite controller is the one that made me realize I'm not as bad at action RPGs as I thought I was. And that would be my PDP Xbox controller. What I love about this controller is that the analog sticks are real stiff. So I have better control. I don't move a millimeter and then the character flies a mile. It's a good size for my hands, it's comfortable for long periods of play, and it's pretty economical. Especially if you don't care about going wireless. I use mine on my PC, and I have a laptop, so it all just goes in my lap, and so I don't really need wireless. And it works great. I mean, I originally bought it for playing when we started playing Dauntless, which feels like an age ago now. But it's gotten plenty of use for other stuff as well, including when I played Hades, which is, not the easiest game by any stretch. So yeah, this is one I really, really like using. Um, Now, I will say, generally speaking, I prefer the shape of PlayStation controllers. but, and I've complained about this in our other controls episodes, is that I hate the analog sticks on almost, well, pretty much every PlayStation controller I've ever used. They're just weak sauce. So that's why I picked this one.
Have you ever had the chance to play with a PS1 controller that was from so early on that it didn't have the analog sticks?
No, because I never actually owned a PS1.
No, fair enough. I'm just curious maybe if you had visited a friend or anything like that and had the opportunity.
No.
But that was when the PlayStation controller in my opinion felt really really good. Now, once we got the analog sticks, we had a little bit more flexibility with movement and whatnot, which is great. But back in its prime, that was an awesome controller in terms of feel.
Yeah, like to me, any of the PlayStation controllers are like just the perfect shape. Like, and generally I love everything else about them. But the analog sticks just kill me. Particularly the left hand analog stick, like we have to use it so often and it loosens up so much that it becomes useless for doing anything precise.
Yeah, no, you're right there. And I also find that the sticks on the PlayStation controllers, they tend to start drifting a lot quicker than the others. Like we've replaced PS3 and PS4 controllers more than any of the other ones that we've ever owned that
Oh,
have
and
had
even
that have
PS
had
even PS2 ones as well.
did we? Okay, I couldn't
Yeah,
remember if we had, but
yeah. They're not. I don't think we're quite as bad, but we have had analog stick drift on the PS2 as well.
yeah. The only other time we've had it was with one of our Joy-Cons on for the Switch, but that was a known issue and Nintendo fixed it for us. So I mean that was great.
Yeah,
But like with the other ones, I mean it just standard usage, wear and tear, uh, like the excess usage of those analog sticks just kind of hit. I noticed it one time when I was playing, I think it was Dark Souls 3 was one of the first times I noticed it on our PS4s. And yeah, it was, well, it made the game almost impossible to play. Well, impossible to play well, and even then, that's a stretch because it's Dark Souls. But I completely understand that. The one thing I do remember though is that when we had or were using those little thumb grips or the really really large thumb grips that we had for the PS4 controller, which we never put back on when we replaced it. Um, I felt like it did create a little bit more sensitivity, and it did make them a bit more useful in that regard.
yeah. I liked having those on it. I don't know. I think we just misplaced the old ones. But yeah, I mean, you shouldn't. It just seems like the modern PlayStation controllers don't hold up that well over time. And I mean, given the price point of modern controllers, and really even starting in the PS3 era, that's just not cool. Like we pay out the nose for these.
Yeah, yeah, no, I completely agree. All right, well, let's move on to Mel. Yeah, let's hear what kind of controller you like more than all of the other ones.
Well, I had my thought on this, and then I thought, I wonder if someone's done some research on this. And it turns out, yes, people have researched this. And you should check out research articles because people publish about the weirdest things. But for me, I think it comes down to hand size. So they've done all these studies that show that, like, doctors and people who play basketball and people who use controllers all have, it depends on what they prefer based on how big their hands are. So like a third of female surgeons have significant difficulty using the tools they need to do their work because their hands are too small. So this is a huge issue across the board. Thanks again, patriarchy, you total douche. This study that I found, which we can link when we post, is about game controllers. And it found basically that people with larger hands could reach more of the buttons on the controller without having to move from the natural position. And people with smaller hands had to adjust more often. So it led to more fatigue, but it also meant you couldn't be as quick on some of the controls. So I have fairly long fingers, but I have really small hands. So some controllers just don't feel like something I can manage. Xbox is really bad for this. I really hate using an Xbox controller. I feel like I'm a child using it, which is probably why, unsurprisingly, I really like the Switch controls. The controller that you get that comes with it, so like when it's hooked up to the TV and you can slide it into that little case, it's so small and so lovely and compact, and I actually feel like I can touch every button that I need to touch without shifting my grip. It makes such a big difference that I'm not just like constantly adjusting, constantly trying to get to the right control. You did mention that thing about drift, and obviously that was an issue. I had that problem too. But like, I get so much more satisfaction in being able to be in the moment of my game when it's a controller that just fits in my hands. Maybe I need a kid's controller. Like, I don't know why they're one size fits all.
Yeah, because they don't. They don't fit all hand
They
sizes.
really don't. Like, I think the study breaks it down, and like the average difference in size is like a fair bit. And like I compared, the PlayStation controllers through time, and they're mostly the same size, but everyone gets a little bit bigger, which just makes it harder.
Well, yeah, like I was mentioning earlier, when they added in the analog sticks, like before that point, it was a really thin, fairly small controller. But I
Mhm.
think the place where they positioned the analog sticks, while logical, it added a certain difficulty for your thumbs for where they were supposed to go, where they were supposed to reach. Because now you're reaching into this new territory to use these new additions to the controller itself. And yeah, you're right. Like the size or the shape to some extent, like the ergonomics of it, they've all changed with each generation. Except for the PS2 era, they stayed fairly the same. I guess there may be a slight size increase, but not by much, I
Yeah,
don't think.
it's pretty small.
Um,
It's like
yeah,
it's like points of centimeters.
but yeah, once we got into PS3 and PS4, when the shape started to really kind of modify, I feel like in some ways it was trying to grow with the initial audience. So the people who bought the PlayStation 1 at a young age, as they got older, as they were getting physically bigger, they increased the size of it. But that doesn't help for the other generations that have been buying the product.
Yeah, and I think this is part of why Nintendo's doing better, because Nintendo's like, oh, we have children gamers, we have older gamers, like we have a more diverse audience in some way. So they actually care to make it more accessible.
Well, and I think really the PlayStation thing is probably more about the added electronics and complications that they've put into their controllers in recent generations more than anything else. It's just like they need space for that stuff. I don't know that for sure, but that would be my guess on what based on what I've seen. But yeah, it is a major issue, and certainly one of the things I've had to do with actually what I had to do with the Vita was I actually bought a frame for it that reshaped it to be more similar to a traditional PlayStation controller in shape because I found it utterly unusable with my hands.
And that's something I didn't even think about initially, too, was the thought of, pre-switch handhelds.
Yeah.
Like the controls themselves. Like I had huge issues myself with when we first got the Nintendo DS. Even with the XL, like it was better when we moved to 3DS XL, but it was still a huge issue because of the way the controls were so close to one another, and being a handheld, I was typically hunched a little bit. I found myself having a lot of like spine or rib issues that I had to go to a chiropractor to get adjusted because like I'm just sitting there like not really paying attention to time, not taking the breaks that those games kept telling you to do every so often. Nintendo was really good for that, I remember. And yeah, like I ended up with actual physical problems that needed medical attention.
Well, yeah, that's just it. Like, and it just goes back to what Mel was saying is that these things really aren't one size fits all. And because honestly, like if I hadn't been able to get that thing for the Vita, I would never use it ever.
Yeah.
Um, because it took very little time for my hands to cramp up really badly. There's just something about the size and shape of the Vita that murders my hands. And plus the positioning of that stupid touchpad thingy underneath. Like
Oh yeah.
that's where my fingers naturally lie. Do you think I could keep my fingers off that? No.
Yeah, I didn't think there was a way to turn it off in specific games or something like that, but
And I
like
I
like
think
like
that's eventually what I did, but like really you should be able to use these things proficiently out of the box, and really the where things are positioned needs to be thought out better some of the time, because really like that was just that touchpad thing on the underneath of the Vita, like that was just dumb. I'm sorry, there's just dumb.
yeah, I think the biggest mistake that they made there is that it was too big. I think it needed a specific size and to be a little bit smaller in a specific positioning, and it needed like maybe a lid or something you could slide up and down to turn it on and turn it like to keep it from being an issue in games you didn't need it for. Um, I don't know. Like, obviously, hindsight's 2020, and I'm trying to spitball ideas for something that isn't being supported now, and quite frankly, was hardly being supported then. So, really, there's not much I can do. But at the same time, it's nice to think about it.
Well, yeah, exactly. And one would hope that, they have like postmortems on this sort of stuff at these companies, but who knows?
Yeah, like I mean, if I'm gaming for any length of time, I have to use compression gloves because of just like how much like extra fatigue my hands are taking. It just makes it hard to game. Like, come on, if you make a good controller, we'll play more.
Well, yeah, that's just it. And when you do find a controller that you love, it's just like it feels so good. Like you just get it in your hands, you're just like, oh. You know what I had that feeling with? And this is going to sound completely bizarre to people. The Wii U gamepad. I am not kidding. The first time I put that in my hands, I was just like, this is perfection. And then, of course, the console was not liked by anyone. So,
A Monolith Soft liked it enough to make Xenoblade X. That's all I care about.
yeah, I know. But it was one of those things where I was you get it in your hands, you're just like, oh, I love this, and then nope, you
Well,
end up hardly using it because hardly anything well was made for it. So
yeah. And you know what the funny thing too is like I'm actually looking at that controller right now. It just happens to be in my line of sight as we're recording. And like the similarities between it and the Switch as I'm looking at it are pretty impressive. Like as a handheld. So like yeah, the two joysticks aren't lopsided like the Wii or the Switch is now, but from a grip perspective, I mean it is still a little thinner, but I think they've kind of thought about that in terms like in one spot, like where the triggers were held. So yes, it's hard to describe. There's just that little nook where you put your hands under so that you don't accidentally hit the triggers. And I think that's something that they really kind of thought about and translated from one controller to the next. So I don't know if it's just a coincidence or if it's what they actually had planned, but I do think that the Wii U controller was, well, I think it's obvious that it was an inspiration for the Switch, but I think they put a lot more thought into making sure that it felt comfortable, and especially in in the cases for that Mel was talking about and in that study. So it's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, when you on the surface, it seems ridiculous because it's almost comically big, right?
Yeah.
But and like my hands are really average. Um, I would say in size, but man, it just felt so perfectly set up for my hands. And had there been more games for it, I'm sure I would have used it like crazy.
Yeah. I like the control. I a controller. I had no problems with it. But yeah, you had this certain kinship with it that I couldn't fully fathom. And that's great. That means like, like you were saying, it's you found the one, right? Like it's pretty impressive. Like when you get to that point, it's a great feeling.
Yeah. I just, like I said, wish there was more games for it.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a great
Yeah.
tragedy.
Yep. All right, let's move on to my choice and controller. Now, I'm also picking a very, very strange choice here, but I do want you to hear me out on it because I've thought about this from an RPG gamer's perspective. So, one of my favorite controllers was the N64 controller. I thought this was one of the weirdest but unique designs. And I honestly thought that when I first was going to put it in my hand, I wasn't going to like it. But I was surprisingly mistaken. I'm quite thankful for that. So you had the three handles on the controller, and I thought that that was a genius thing for RPGs at the time. The far left handle was had the directional pad on it, so you basically you get into a random encounter, you can run through the menus no problem. So you'd switch your hand up there, run through your menus. Your right hand was always the kind of the command buttons and the camera buttons and whatnot, so that never really changed. But then when you were going rocking around the world or doing any type of travel, you'd move to the the joystick, which was in the middle handle. And if your and we were talking about hand size before. If your hand was large enough, or your fingers were long enough, your thumb was long enough, really, you could basically from the far end, from the directional pad, reach in and actually just use the joystick for movement without having to shift from handle to handle. It was a real shame because much like a lot of Nintendo consoles after the Super Nintendo, they didn't get a lot of RPG play, which was really unfortunate. Like the only two games I can think of offhand that the N64 had that were RPGs was Quest 64, which was mediocre at best, and Ogre Battle 64, which never played, but strategy RPG, which I know I think we have a copy of it on our Wii U Wii thing. I'm not sure. I
We
can't
have,
remember.
I don't think it's that one. We have, um, oh shit, which one's March the Black Queen? Because I think that's the one we have.
Yeah, well, I know that's okay. That's the one we have, but yeah, I don't know offhand. But um, but yeah, like it was a severely lacking in its overall potential for RPG gaming. Like I would love to get a replica, use it on a laptop, play some emulated games, some old school stuff with it, and just have a fantastic time. Because while it seems not very intuitive to be just changing hands, basically changing your left hand from one section to the next on a regular basis, it really ended up being a lot more fluid and natural. And if you're playing an RPG, it's especially a turn-based RPG. I don't know how this would work for action RPGs, I'll be honest. But for anything turn-based, turn-based strategy, hands down, I think that would have been one of the most interesting experiences.
Okay, to clarify, no, March of the Black Queen was the SNES one. Person of Lordly Caliber was Ogre Battle 64.
Okay, perfect. Okay. I don't know. Did I miss? If you listeners out there know of any other RPGs that were on the N64 that I missed, let me know. Because, well, I guess the original Paper Mario was N64 as well, so I guess that would count. But I'm drawing a blank on other titles. So if you guys know any more, let me know. Because I'd love to go back and play me some old school N64 games. All right, so I guess that's going to be it for our not only our discussion on our favorite controllers, but just our discussion on controls as well for the month of April. I hope you guys have had a lot of fun. We've had a lot of fun kind of just coming up with different ways to talk about controls. So I want to know what you guys think, not only just about this episode, but what did you guys think about this month's topic in general? Is this something you'd like to see more of? Would you like us to do more monthly topics like this? And if so, if you have any suggestions for them, please let us know. As always, there's several ways for you to get in touch with us. You can do that through our group email, which is xpbillionaires@gmail.com, or you can hit up our social media, and that's you can find me on Twitter at billionairesxp, or you can find me on Instagram at ravethegram. Sky, where can everyone find you?
I'm at SkyKnightXP on Twitter and SkyKnight.xp on Instagram.
And Mel, where can everyone find you?
You can find me at Feminist Gamer on Instagram or Feminist Gamer 3 on Twitter, and you can check me out on D4 Adventures, which is a D&D game. Well, sorry, which is a Fate game that we are playing over Twitch.
Awesome. Sounds good. And don't forget, xpbillionaires.ca is your one-stop shop for everything XP Billionaires, which will also include our written works, quickfire reviews, the weekly RPG writing roundup. Did I get it right this time?
Yep.
Awesome. All right, I'm getting there. All right, we're good. We're going there. And most importantly, for this week's episode, if you're having any trouble with the descriptions of our episodes where you're listening to us right now, the link to the study Mel was talking about will be on our episode release announcement on the website itself. So you'll be able to find the copy of that right then and there if you're having trouble. So please check that out. And of course, if you are looking to support us in any way, shape, or form, you can do that through our coffee page, and there is a link to that on the website as well. So once again, xpbillionaires.ca. Please check it out. We love seeing everybody coming in and checking out everything that we do. All right, so that is it for us this week. And remember, if it feels good in your hand, you can keep gaming longer. So to get at it, and we'll see you next week.
Have a good night.
Bye-bye.